One of the most unusual villains to appear in Justice League was the Ultra-Humanite, a towering white ape with a bulbous skull. Both physically and intellectually mighty, but they never really explained who he was or how he came to be, and I think that's part of his charm. He's a mercenary with refined tastes, a patron of the arts, and a criminal who values culture over conquest. The fact that he happens to be a white gorilla is treated as incidental, not an obstacle to overcome or a mystery to solve, and that confidence makes him one of Justice League's most memorable villains in my eyes. What makes that confidence so striking is how different he is from his comic book counterpart, and if you'll permit me a few moments, I'll explain what I mean. The Ultra-Humanite made his first appearance in Action Comics number 13, published in 1939. He was Superman's first recurring supervillain, bald, brilliant, bitter, and physically frail. He embodied an idea that comics would return to again and again, that the human mind is more dangerous than a fist. In an era obsessed with strength, Siegel and Schuster built a villain who couldn't throw a punch, but he could still threaten the world with his schemes. Superman was muscle and morality, while the Ultra-Humanite was intellect without restraint. Visually and thematically, he was a prototype for the bald, evil scientist archetype that would later find its definitive form in Lex Luthor. You can almost see the handover happening in real time too. Where the Ultra-Humanite is bound to wheelchairs, laboratories, and elaborate death traps, Luthor streamlines the concept. He's the same intellect, the same bald head, a healthier body, and far more egocentric. Lex Luthor became the Superman villain. The Ultra-Humanite, having done the hard conceptual work, was quietly pushed aside. And actually, one of the things that really amuses me about these first Ultra-Humanite stories is how Siegel and Schuster were fumbling around trying to define what a supervillain was. His early schemes are actually pretty mundane. He was the head of a taxi protection racket, but gradually things became more epic in scope. By his death, he had unleashed a plague on Metropolis, hoping to wipe out humanity and replace them with a new species of his own design, which is a long way from beating up cabbies for their pocket change, I think you'll agree. But before his demise, he did something oddly progressive. After Superman basically kills him by pulling him in front of a death ray, he was declared dead, but this wouldn't be his end. His henchmen found him, and he had enough strength to provide them with instructions on how to save him. The Ultra-Humanite had his brain transplanted into the body of actress Dolores Winters, and suddenly, one of the most unexpected moments in Golden Age comics arrived, without any fanfare at all. What's remarkable isn't just the body swap, it's how little the comic makes of it. The Ultra-Humanite does not become Dolores in any meaningful sense. He retires her career, he uses her yacht to kidnap celebrities, and continues exactly as before. Superman even recognizes him in Dolores' body because he has the same contemptible look in his eyes. And that's the other thing. The narration and Superman himself continue to refer to Ultra-Humanite as he. His body has changed, but his identity has not. In 1940, without comment or commentary, a Superman comic treats gender as something distinct from physical form. It isn't the punchline of a joke, he's just as dangerous in his female form. There's no moralizing or confusion, it's just a blunt assertion that the self lives in the mind, and everyone accepts it and moves on. Now, I don't think they were trying to be progressive here. I think that they just thought of a cool twist that would allow them to keep using the character, and actually the Ultra-Humanite had always stated that his body was a limitation, so it makes sense that he'd discard it. But perhaps this idea was a bit too controversial for the times, as the Ultra-Humanite only appeared 2 other times before disappearing for decades. I haven't been able to find a source explaining why he disappeared, so I can really just speculate. Regardless, he returned to make a handful of appearances in the 1970s, including one where he moved from Dolores' body to that of a giant ant, okay, but they were mostly inconsequential. The only thing of note is that as DC's continuity grew to be more complex, Ultra-Humanite was part of Earth 2's continuity, the universe where Superman had been active in the 1940s. Then, in the 1980s, Ultra-Humanite went through his biggest revision to date. After having switched bodies so many times that he had lost count, Ultra-Humanite decided to find a form that can finally match his towering intellect. This time he took over the body of an albino gorilla. It's a look so striking that it almost overwrites everything that came before it. The towering white ape, the sneering genius. His brain was finally paired with overwhelming physical power. And his first act was to assemble a new secret society of supervillains to take on the Justice League and the Justice Society, with a scheme to erase them from his universe, although he did not succeed. While he spent most of his appearances as the albino gorilla, he swapped bodies multiple times again, including briefly becoming a T-Rex. Following Crisis on Infinite Earths, when most of DC's continuity was reset, Ultra-Humanite only went through a small change. Now that Superman had no longer existed during World War II, the Ultra-Humanite was reimagined as a persistent thorn in the side of the Justice Society of America. In the modern era, when the JSA were pensioners, Ultra-Humanite had transferred to a new body that he had genetically engineered, but even then that wasn't enough to defeat them. So that's been a whistle-stop tour of Ultra-Humanite's comic book history prior to his first on-screen appearance in the Justice League two-parter Injustice for All. Now, this version of Ultra-Humanite arrives stripped to essentials. He doesn't get an origin story. Just what did he do to get put in prison in the first place? There's no sign of him ever being a monologuing mad scientist. There's no explanation of how this hyper-intelligent albino gorilla came to be. He simply is. This was a fairly common exercise that the DCAU creative team took part in when adapting characters. They had a long history of looking back at the comic book source material, mining all the best bits and discarding all the convoluted stuff that bogs a decades-old character down. And here, no one questions it, much in the same way that none of the characters in the earliest comics questioned his change in body. That's one of the things that I quite like. This world had already established that there was a secret city populated with talking gorillas, the imaginatively named Gorilla City. But I don't think that he's that sort of talking gorilla, given his childhood references to celebrating Christmas with an aluminium Christmas tree. And do they even celebrate Christmas in Gorilla City? Answers on a postcard, please. We're left to assume that he was the result of some sort of mad science experiment involving mind transference. Unlike most other villains, Ultra-Humanite doesn't really have a philosophy. He's not trying to reshape the world, prove a point, or avenge a perceived slight. He works for money, full stop. That's why his partnership with Lex Luthor is actually quite perfect and deeply ironic. Lex Luthor, the man who replaced him as Superman's definitive intellectual nemesis in the comics, now has to hire him. There's no loyalty here, no shared ideology or mutual admiration. It's just a verbal contract. And when Batman offers more money, Ultra-Humanite doesn't hesitate to turn on his cohorts. There's something refreshingly honest about that. In a series full of gods, aliens and zealots, Ultra-Humanite is a professional, evil as a vocation. He treats villainy like a freelance gig and Luthor like any other employer, useful until outbid. And what really sets this version apart, though, is taste. This Ultra-Humanite loves opera, classical music and art. He takes the money he was given by Batman and donates to public broadcasting to ensure that they can keep producing an opera. For him, the jail sentence is worth it because art will continue to exist. It is unlikely to be a financially rewarding donation, and I doubt it's a tax write-off, but it enriches his spirit and potentially the spirits of those around him that also have to listen to the music. Culture is how he defines himself. He states that he represents human advancement, and it's what sets him apart from other powerful monster-type villains like Solomon Grundy. And Batman's pretty canny to see this. He knows that bribing Humanite would have been crude, but giving him the means to become a patron works. As part of Luthor's ensemble of supervillains, Humanite stands out. The sight of a massive pale gorilla in a lab coat is pretty striking, but I think he truly shined in the episode Comfort and Joy. This episode goes out of its way to show Ultra-Humanite's softer edges, but never in a way that excuses him. He's willing to pause a scheme and not kill the Flash to share culture with disadvantaged children. The Flash had been on a Christmas quest to find the hottest toy, DJ Rubber Ducky, for a group of orphans. After he gets the last one from the manufacturer in Tokyo, he stumbles upon Humanite's rampage. He is outraged about the amount of public funding that has been spent on a modern art exhibition, and in the conflict, the toy gets broken. The orphan's Christmas is doomed. But this is something Ultra-Humanite will not abide by. He uses his genius to repair the broken toy and gives it one of his signature upgrades. Instead of making fart sounds, the toy will now tell the children the story of the Nutcracker, as narrated by Humanite himself. And as his reward, the Flash visits him in prison and gives him a tacky aluminium Christmas tree. This is a key detail that tells us a lot about his background without really using any words. I don't think these were particularly popular in the UK, but a cursory Google search says that these artificial trees were all the rage in the 1960s. It's throwaway and crass on the surface, but loaded with implication. For Humanite, it's a memory of something small and human that he didn't entirely lose when he became a supervillain. He doesn't monologue about it or explain himself. He just admits that he hasn't had one since he was a child, and for a moment, the ape and the intellect and the criminal mastermind all fall away as he sits and stares at the coloured lights. Lesser shows would have had Humanite reveal all, telling us about his childhood love of Christmas, but instead the performance of Ian Buchanan and the work of the animators tells us all we need to know. Ultra-Humanite didn't appear in Justice League Unlimited, presumably because with Gorilla Grodd as one of the primary villains, they didn't need two superpowered apes running around, which is a bit of a shame because it would have been fun to see the two interact with each other. In the comics, the Ultra-Humanite is about rejection of the body. In Justice League, he's about acceptance of the self. The show doesn't care how he got there, it cares who he is now. A cultured mercenary, a villain with boundaries, a criminal who values sophistication over victory. Stripping away all backstory doesn't diminish the Ultra-Humanite though. Instead, they allow a different aspect of his character to shine. And perhaps the cleverest twist of all is that the character who once needed a dozen bodies to survive is at last comfortable in his own monstrous skin. Okay, that's it for this essay. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, tell all your friends about me. You know how YouTube works. If you really liked the video and feel like tossing a buck or two my way, please consider using the thanks button, because every little helps. And if you have really enjoyed my work, you might want to pick up a copy of my book, Rogues Gallery. It features 22 essays on villains from Batman the Animated Series. There's a beautiful cover by Batman the Animated Series background artist John Calmette, a foreword by director Dan Reber, and a moving segment from the late Kevin Conroy sharing his thoughts on life, love, and loss. Plus, an exclusive essay on the Condiment King that will never be made into a video. Rogues Gallery is available worldwide on Amazon, both digitally and in softcover. Finally, channel memberships are just $1.99 a month and give you early access to my essays, custom emojis, and your name featured on my members end screen, which has been rolling for a little while now. Huge thanks to everyone who's already part of this. You've helped to make these videos possible. If you want to see your name up here too, join the channel now. And while I have your attention, please consider checking out my other channel, Serum Lake Comics, where I talk about mostly DC comic books. Next time. When I return on Monday, I'm going to revisit the new Batman adventures to talk about inherited mistakes and chosen identities in the episode Sins of the Father. And next Friday, I'll be talking about the DCAU's unstoppable reporter who's always one step ahead, fearless in the pursuit of a story and never afraid to shake up Metropolis. Yeah, it's time to talk about Lois Lane. Hope to see you then.